Brett McKay here, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Manliness podcast. Now, what do you think your life would be like if you tried to live every single one of the more than 700 laws and commandments in the Bible? I'm not talking about the 10 Commandments, but like those little small ones that, are in Leviticus and it's just gets a passing line. Or how about if you try to read every single page of the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1 year? Or what do you think your life would be like if you tried to follow every bit of health advice that you see on the news or you read on blogs or in magazines or newspapers? Well, our guest today has done just those things. His name is AJ Jacobs, and he is a writer, and he's also the editor-at-large at Esquire magazine, and he's a self-proclaimed human guinea pig. Today we're going to talk about some of these crazy experiments that AJ has done with his life and that he's written about. And we're going to talk about what he's learned from these experiments, how they've helped him become a better husband, a better father, just an overall better man, some of the missteps and some of the more funny things that have happened from those experiments. And we're going to talk about how you can get started with your own personal life experiments and why you should do that. So it's a great episode, great information, and it's going to be just a fun conversation. So stay tuned. AJ Jacobs, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brett. Great to be here.
So you've sort of made a career for yourself being a human guinea pig. You do these sort of audacious self-experiments, life experiments, and then you write essays for Esquire or you write a book about it. How did you get started with self-experimentation?
I'm happy to tell it. First, I want to kiss your ass for just 1 second because I love your website, and I was just looking at it today. I love the chest hair toupee. I mean, that is gold right there. And then you printed recently an essay from 1902 Cosmopolitan about sissies, and it was just crazy and bizarre. And I agreed with some of it, and I found some of it incredibly offensive, but it was wonderful to read.
Well, I appreciate that. And I gotta return the ass kissing because I've been a big fan of your work in Esquire and just your books. I think how long have you been doing? I think I've been reading your stuff since like high school. I don't want to make you feel old or anything, but I think I might have been doing that. So,
well, that is fine. That makes me feel not old, but wise. Yeah, how's that?
There you go.
Trying to spin it. So I've been doing these experiments on myself for years. Mostly they're self-improvement. I need a lot of improvement. And I think one of my inspirations was this writer named George Plimpton, who was a journalist like in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And he would dive in and immerse himself in his stories. So he joined a baseball team and a football team, professional, and played along with them. He got hit in the face by a professional boxer. I don't like getting hit in the face, but I like the idea of immersing yourself. So I decided I'm going to try to do this with every topic I do. So, if I want to learn about the Bible, I'm going to try. I decided to spend a year living by all the rules of the Bible. If I want to learn about health, I'm going to try to follow all the medical advice in the world. So that's sort of the genesis of it.
All right. And so how do you decide like which experiments you're doing? So you've done the living a year biblically where you followed all the rules. You grew a beard. You wore like a white linen. I don't know what would you call that. It's almost a skirt. The way you describe it.
A robe.
A robe. There you go. That's a more manly, right?
That's right.
Way to describe it. Now you're doing.
Although I think I have heard the manly version of a skirt is a skort. Isn't that right?
I've seen those.
Yeah,
it's
something like
a utility skort.
Something like that.
Something like that. So how do you decide? I mean, it's just like you see something or you read about something. You're like, that's really interesting. I'm going to go for that. Or are these things you've always wanted to do? Or are they things that sort of come up in conversation? You think, hey, that would actually be a great experiment to try out?
Most of it's got to be something I'm passionate about and I really want to learn about. Like with the Bible, I really wanted to learn about. I knew nothing about religion for my whole life. I say in the book I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. So not very. But And same with health. I was in terrible shape. So I thought this is the way to learn. And recently I went to a lecture on 3D printing. I don't know if you've heard of 3D printing. Oh, yeah. And I was fascinated. And I was like, how can I dive into that? And my idea was, I'll 3D print everything in my life, my clothes, my furniture, my toothbrush. And it turned out, I talked to some experts, that would cost like $500,000. So I had to scale back a little, and I did the first full 3D printed dinner. So 4 courses of 3D printed food, and all of the forks and knives, and my tie was 3D printed. So it's basically whatever is most interesting. I want to explore, and this is how I do it.
Wow. So yeah, that 3D printing experiment sounds like you like turned into George Jetson. He's like print the food up. That's pretty amazing.
I felt it was very George Jetson, a little Star Trek thrown in there with a replicator. Yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, it is a wild thing, the 3D printing. I tried to do it myself, and my own attempts are very primitive. My fork looks like something a chimpanzee would use to get termites out of a hill. But the professionals, these engineers who do it, it's remarkable.
Okay, so it seems like just from just surfing the net and watching the news, it seems like self-experimentation is just it's like all the rage now. Everyone's like tracking every bodily movement, function, their mood, how productive they are, and they're tweaking things to see if they can improve themselves. I guess it's the whole quantified self movement.
Right. And I'm a big fan of the quantified self movement. Yeah.
Why do you think it's suddenly become a thing? I mean, why are people measuring and tracking themselves, and why are they trying these experiments on their lives?
Yeah, it is interesting that it has become a thing. I mean, I saw a few months ago, The Onion did a fake article about an app that tracked you whenever you pooped, and it would tweet out to all your friends whenever you had a bowel movement and the details. So I think that it's easily mockable, but there is a movement toward it. No pun intended. And I think one of the things that appeals to me is that the science says that the more you keep track of things in your life, the more you quantify them, the more healthily you will behave. So just a simple one like getting a pedometer, that will make you walk more because you'll have a goal. Like my goal is 10,000 steps a day. And I really want to get to it. It gives me it gives me way too much pleasure to get to 10,000 steps. I need to find something more important in my life to be focused on. But I love having the goal. And I'm very motivated by competition. I think a lot of men are. So I'm on a website. I have a Fitbit, which links to my computer, and I have friends, so I can see how many steps they walked every day. And they can mock me if I didn't get to my goal, and I mock them. So it's a lot about humiliating your friends. So I find that very uplifting.
Yeah, I got the Fitbit too. I'm really bad about it. I'll let it lose all of its charge, and then I won't do it for a month, and then I'll find it again. Like, hey, this is great. I want to do it, and then I get back on track. So yeah, I've read those studies too, that when you track things, another example is money. When you track every cent you spend, you tend to spend less money and you're more wise with your money. Besides that benefit, are there, through your experience doing this whole quantified self thing and self-experimentation, is there a downside personally or maybe even culturally or societally when you have all these people measuring themselves and sort of being introspective like this and tweaking their lifestyle? Is there a downside to that, or is it all positive?
Well, I think I have heard a lot of people who find a downside that if you're tracking your weight, for instance, every day and you lose half a pound a day, I mean, if you gain half a pound on Tuesday, it puts you in a terrible mood for Wednesday. And, your whole self-esteem is tied to these tiny little changes. That's not the way I work. So luckily it hasn't affected me, but there is that danger. I think, for me, the positives outweigh the negatives. For instance, there's one other motivation I have with this self-tracking thing is their websites called Charity Miles is one of them. Mm-hmm. And they will you link up your Fitbit, and if you get to a certain number of steps, they will donate money to a charity. They have like sponsors who will do that. So, I mean, I love that, because if I'm tracking my steps and I don't get to enough steps, I feel like a terrible person. I feel like I'm, because I give money to Haiti through this thing, fresh water to Haiti. So if I'm not walking, then I feel like, God, I'm a bastard. I'm like actually hurting people in Haiti. So I find that very motivating.
Very good. So let's talk more about some of your specific memoirs and life experiments you've done. We've mentioned several times about your year of living biblically. And this is where you live by every jot and tittle. Is that right? Tittle?
Yeah, sure.
Jot and tittle in the Bible.
Which I think, I may be wrong. Our listeners might want to. The tittle, I believe, is the cross on the T, right? And the jot is the I. Is that right? Or am I making that up?
I think you're right.
All right.
I think that's right.
I just throw that out.
And one of it's just hilarious. I mean, just sort of the things that happen in it. Because it is hard to live all these things in a modern world. But there's a lot of poignant insights that you got from the book. And the one that really hit home for me, and it actually helped me write a blog post on the art of manliness, was this idea as you lived these these rituals, your idea and attitude towards religion or towards sacredness changed.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience you had?
Oh, that's one of the huge themes, I think, that runs through all of my experiments, all of my life. How much behavior affects your thoughts, how the outer affects the inner. There's a great quote, I wish I had made it up, but it's by the founder of Habitat for Humanity. He says that it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than it is to think your way into a new way of acting. So this came about like in the Bible. I would act as if I were a good person, even though, I might not feel like a good person. I had a friend in the hospital. I hate hospitals. I didn't want to go, but I was like, a good person would go. So I would go, and it would sort of trick my mind. I'd see I'm in the hospital. Oh, I must be compassionate. And then you become a little more compassionate. And I think that works in every part of life. It works in writing. If I'm feeling like I don't want to write, I just start moving my fingers and typing whatever crazy talk comes out of my fingers. Like, it can be about the coffee I'm drinking. But you get into a rhythm and you sort of trick your mind, and it's like, oh, okay, now I'm writing now. I feel more confident. And then you start writing a little bit more coherently. So for me, this is a huge thing. And it's run through several of my experiments. Something as simple as the way you hold your body, that has a huge effect. I did this experiment on George Washington. He had 110 rules of life. You might know so he wrote them down as a young man. My favorite, by the way, is number 2. His second rule, this is number 2, was do not adjust your private parts in public, like no pocket pool. Which seems like it's a good rule, but for number 2, it seems a little maybe overemphasis. Anyway, one of the things that he was famous for was his posture. He had amazing posture, so I thought I would try that. The shoulders back, chest out, and it actually affected the way I felt. I felt more confident, more energetic. I'm doing it now, and I'll tell you, he was way ahead of his time, because there are Harvard studies now, a lot of them, that the way you hold your body affects your mood, even your testosterone level, if you want to be manly about it. So, and there's a great TED Talk on this, by the way, that's gotten like millions of views. I really recommend it, but it's all about the power position. And just Google TED Talks, Harvard posture, and it'll pop up.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful principle for if people want to make anybody wants to make any improvements in their life. It's just like, I tell people, like, just do it. Just like start doing it. Because I think a lot of people have this idea is, okay, well, first I have to get motivated. I'll read some inspirational book. And then once I feel motivated, then I'll start doing these things. But like, it doesn't work that way. I mean,
no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you can get, to me, it's like, there can be a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle. So the vicious cycle is, you you sit on your butt and you get depressed because you're not exercising, and then you get more depressed because when you don't exercise, it affects your mood. So if you just take that first step and just like force yourself to do something, then it becomes a virtuous cycle, and you feel better, and you're like more motivated to do something more, and then you feel better, and it just becomes a positive feedback loop.
Excellent. I'm curious, do you still do any of the habits you picked up in A Year of Living Biblically, or did you just discard all of those after you were done?
Well, I did discard a lot. I mean, there was like, I shaved my beard.
Yeah.
The Bible says you can't have a beard, so I had a crazy ZZ Top beard. And I did, the Bible says you can't wear clothes made of mixed fibers, so I don't do that anymore. I went back to plenty I keep. One that really had an effect on me was this idea of gratitude, because the Bible says you should give thanks. And I was taking that literally. So I was giving thanks all the time. I would press the elevator button and I'd give thanks that the elevator came, and I'd get in the elevator and I'd be thankful it didn't plummet to the basement and break my collarbone. And it was crazy. It was a crazy way to live, but it was also wonderful, because you realize when you do this that there are hundreds of things that go right every day that we totally take for granted. And we focus on the 3 or 4 things that go wrong. So if you can even have a partial shift in your perspective, then you can really start to see how miraculous it is, how much goes right. And I've definitely tried to keep that.
Very good. Let's talk about your wife, because your wife often plays a big role in these life experiments. I mean, it's hard not for her to. And some of them involve her directly. Some of them don't. The one that involved her directly, and I think she appreciated it, was the one in your book, My Life as an Experiment, where you tried to be the perfect husband.
Yes.
Basically just doing whatever she asked.
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it was funny, but what did you get it? Like, did your perspective about marriage and relationships change because of that experiment?
Yeah, I mean, it was the experiment was called Whipped, and the idea was it was actually suggested by readers, because they're like, you've been such a pain in the ass to your wife. Why don't you do a month where you just do everything she says? And so I was her total doormat. Whatever she said, I did, and it was horrible. It was a horrible month. I can be quite honest. It was like she was drunk with power. She was like, it was Kate Hudson movies were involved. It was terrible. But yeah, there were takeaways. There were definitely lessons. One of them is related to what we were just talking about. I would force myself to buy a present, like a little gift every day, because I knew she liked that, and that's what she wanted. And it didn't have to be big. It could be like, a little, I don't know, a box, a paper bag, one flower. But just the act of doing that, it made me like, oh, I'm giving a gift to my wife. I must love her. And then you sort of love her more, and you convince yourself, and it made our relationship better. And of course, she loved it. So it was this virtuous circle where you're nice to her and she's nice to you, and it just improves your life. I will say there was one part of that experiment that has a continued negative effect on my life. I mean, our marriage is probably better, but my life is worse, because we made a list of every household chore that we did, and at her demand. And I thought I was doing like 40% of the housework, and she was doing 60. The real split was more like 15-85. And it was so. And once we both saw that on the paper, like, I can never get back to that 15, because she's like, you got to do this, you got to do that. So I think we are, one of our many, many delusions in life, and at least mine, is that we think we do more than we actually do.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And I think, you always overestimate what you do, and you always underestimate like what your partner does.
Right.
And that always causes friction. And I think that happens in every marriage. Because what you're doing, right? Like, like you're keeping track of what you're doing, but you're not keeping track of what your wife's doing.
Exactly.
Really.
I mean, there are things we have the liquid soap, and I just figured it refilled itself. I didn't know the bottles, like I thought it was like a self-cleaning oven. It just refilled, and then I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I have to do it myself.
Oh, so let's talk about some of these moments where you were sort of like a pain in the butt for your wife with your experiments. I mean, some of them were just like it was like you're living biblically. There was lots of moments like that. But any advice? Because like I think I've encountered this too, where I try these sort of like self experiments, and it sort of gets in the way a little bit of my wife's plans, and she gets she gets sort of frustrated. It's like, oh,
Sure.
do you have to do this? Like, what is going on? Any advice for men out there who are like, I want to try experiments. I want to try to improve myself, but how do I not have that tension or create tension in my marriage or relationship?
Yeah, that is it. It's a challenge. I mean, overall, I think she is. She may not have been it, but I think she is happy that I've done these experiments because I do think they've improved me in the end. Like, I may have been a huge pain in the ass when I was doing the biblical book. She wouldn't kiss me because of my beard. But I do think that she's happy. I'm more grateful now, and I do think that I covet and gossip and lie less. I still do it a huge amount, but I've cut down 30%. So maybe just tell your partner, it's for the greater good. It will pay off in the end. And also maybe somehow subtly remind her that, it's interesting. It makes life interesting. I once read a short story. I can't remember who wrote it, about a woman who married this guy, a method actor who, she was like, and she loved it because every month she'd get a different, one day she'd get Stanley Kowalski and the next day she'd get someone else. So maybe just subtly remind her. It keeps life interesting.
Frame it that way. It's good stuff. So you're also a dad, and I think it's like you have all boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wrote an article about I remember a picture of you wrestling your 3 boys, I think.
Yes, exactly. I hope they don't hate me for that when they're older.
But I mean, have you, with your experiments, have they helped you become a better father in any way?
I think so, and I'm trying to think how. Well, I will tell you one example was during the year of living biblically. The Bible is in parts of it, it's very explicit in that you have to do corporal punishment. You have to hit your kids, and not even just with your hand, with a stick. Do not spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
So I felt I had to do this, and it's not my parenting style. So I bought a Nerf stick, a Nerf bat. So I would hit my kid with that when he was like 2 years old at the time. He thought it was hilarious. So he would go and run and get a wiffle bat and start wailing on me. And I was like, this is not the message I want to send. But I do think maybe it's that, as a model, I think it's important to teach kids that a certain amount of boldness is important in life, and that you have to take risks, and sometimes you're going to look like an idiot and you're going to fail a lot, which I do. I fail a tremendous amount, and that you got to be okay with that. That's part of life. And so I think maybe that's where the experiments have made me a better father.
Very good. Your most recent memoir is Drop Dead Healthy, and it's you're trying to be following every bit of medical advice that makes you the healthiest person in the world. In fact, right now you're walking on a standing desk, treadmill desk.
Yes, I do. I love it. I still do that. And I am going to break my 10,000 today.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any short tips from that experience that guys can do today that will radically improve their health and well-being?
Well, there are some things that definitely changed my life. I mean, one of them is just moving as much as possible, and exercise doesn't have to be at the gym. You can just do, you walk, you can do whatever you love, gardening. I don't like gardening. I find it incredibly dull, but some men like it, and that's exercise. So don't think of exercise as just a compartmentalized hour at the gym. Trying to think of your whole life as an exercise, and then just The thing about health after this 2 years, it's really quite simple we all know what behaviors are healthy. The challenge is how do we motivate ourselves to do those behaviors? Because it's really the common sense that, eating whole foods, not processed foods, getting sleep, moving as much as possible, not stressing, and not smoking. Don't hit yourself in the forehead with an axe. It's pretty clear. People try to make it complicated because that's an easy way to make money. If you say, "Oh, I've got the one secret that's going to give you the 8-pack," that's not true. And but it's a way to make money because they're like, "Oh, I have a secret."
Yeah. So just do simple things: move, relax, and eat whole food.
Right. I mean, for me, the secrets are, and actually, I just started writing a column about this for a website called UpWaveKi. And for me, the secret is, how do you motivate yourself? Like, what are the tricks and strategies to make yourself do these healthy behaviors? That's, to me, the key. And that's where I feel I've made progress and studied, found. And they can be simple. They can be weird. There's the leaving your workout clothes by the door so that you're reminded. It could be, there are studies that show that when you are thinking about your older self, that you are acting in a more healthy way, because you're like, you can't, when you respect yourself, respect others, you should respect your older self. Think of your older self as another person. Treat that older self like you would treat a friend. So that, for me, I took that very literally, and I took a photo of myself and I digitally aged it so that I look like I'm like 82, and I put it over my desk so that it's like, think about that guy. Try to treat him with a little respect. Maybe work out or eat healthy. Don't have that fourth Oreo, because you want him to be around. You want him to be able to see his kids get married and have kids, and maybe their kids have kids. So to me, that's one of there are many motivating tricks like that I write about.
Very good. So you just mentioned UpWave.com. I mean, you are the editor-at-large at Esquire. You've written these books, but now you're doing some stuff at UpWave. Can you tell us about what you'll be doing there? Is it more of the same? Is it going to be more health-oriented? Is it going to be just sort of a grab bag of different self-improvement things?
Yeah, it's a very cool website and platform, not just a website. It's going to be on TV as well. And it's all about health and fitness. And my current column is called Jumpstart with A.J. Jacobs. And that's all about motivational techniques. So the ones I just mentioned, for instance, or another one was, I test out some apps, some health apps, see if they work. There's one study that said if you have background noise, just a little bit of background noise, like at a coffee shop, it makes you more creative as opposed to total silence. So you can actually download coffee shop noises from the internet.
Coffitivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know about it. Do you use it?
I use it.
Do you?
I have been using it. Yeah.
I love it. So I'll write about that, and hopefully I'll be doing a web series later in the year. That's the kind of thing. But it's a very good website because it covers for the hardcore, the Tough Mudder people, but also just the people who just want to get a little bit healthy and be around for another few decades.
Very good. Any future plans for big life experiments, like the year of living biblically, or do you got anything up your sleeve like that?
I am working on a new book. I don't know if it's an experiment per se, but it's about ancestry and my ancestors, the history of humans, and for the finale of the book, I'm going to try to hold the biggest family reunion in history.
That's awesome.
I am hoping so. I'm excited, and we've got this guy, Morgan Spurlock, who directed Super Size Me, who I'm a huge fan of. He wants to produce the documentary about it, so that'll be my first documentary, and I am quite psyched, and I'm trying to find relatives. And my idea is that everyone is related. We just have to figure it out. So please try to figure out how you're related to me.
Sure. I imagine you checked out 23andMe, right?
Yes. They've been hugely helpful, and I have thousands of relatives through them. Thank God.
Yeah, I found I did that, and it's sort of bizarre because it's like Gattaca. So for those of you who don't know, 23andMe is like you spit into this thing and you send it to this company, and they sequence your genome. And part of the deal is like they'll tell you if you're related to anybody else who's submitted their DNA as well. And I found like a second cousin. So like we share a great grandfather.
Interesting. And did you get in touch with him or her?
I got in touch with her, and it hasn't gone anywhere though. I'm trying to get information from her, like, hey,
right.
What is there anyone else I don't know about? So it's a pretty cool. I'm actually gonna be doing a post about that pretty soon.
Oh yeah,
but it's
awesome. I'm gonna check and see if we're related.
Yeah,
because I did it. I mean, the interesting thing is, I made my wife do it, and then we compared, and we are cousins. I married my cousin. Yeah, I'm an inbreeder. Pretty excited about that.
All right, so AJ, last question. Any final advice for men who want to get started with self-experimentation?
I guess my only piece of advice is it doesn't have to be big. You don't have to spend a year trying to live by the Bible and write a book about it. It can be just little things, trying out a different toothpaste every couple of weeks, or going a different way to work. And there are studies that show that is actually good for the brain, trying to create new pathways in the brain and getting away from what they call neural ruts, which are like, the same ruts when you're cross-country skiing and go on the same route. So anyway, you can mix up life. I think it makes it a little more interesting, a little more fun, and it's good for your mental health. So little things. Don't think you have to, get a book contract.
Yeah, great. Well, AJ Jacobs, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. I loved it.
Our guest today was AJ Jacobs. AJ is the editor-at-large at Esquire magazine. He has written several books that you can find on Amazon.com. Just search AJ Jacobs. Highly recommend you go check them out. Just very entertaining reads, but you also learn something from them. And he's also now a contributing writer at UpWave.com. It's a lifestyle and wellness site that also is going to have a TV channel as well. And AJ's writing about just research he's discovering on how to become more motivated to improve your life. So great content there, and go check it out. Well, that wraps up another edition of the Art of Manliness podcast. For more manly tips and advice, make sure to check out the Art of Manliness website at artofmanliness.com. And again, if you are enjoying this podcast and you're getting something out of it, I would really appreciate it if you go to iTunes or whatever service you're using to download and listen to the podcast and give us a rating. That would help us reach more viewers and allow us to do more things with the podcast. So I would appreciate that very much. Until next time, this is Brett McKay telling you to stay manly.